I was reminded of the story of Babel and how humankind was cursed with many, many languages. And I think one of the questions that story perhaps raises is, are there any blessings from all our many languages and the different sort of attitudes and perspectives that the different languages bring? Let me just punctuate that with the following point. I'm working on a international book of stories mediators tell, and the first story is about a mediator who's mediating between a French and an English-speaking groups, and each side says, you must conduct this mediation in our language. And the mediator doesn't know what to do and takes a break. And then he starts the mediation. This writer and mediator is Jeremy Lack, who is Swiss and speaks many, many languages and so forth. So he starts the mediation by saying, good morning, bonjour, je suis Jeremy Lack, your mediator. So each sentence is half English and half French. And it's so funny that these adversarial, warring groups, corporations start laughing. And Jeremy says, well, I could continue in this way, but maybe we ought to figure out some other way to bridge these language differences. And of course, it turns into a happy ending kind of story despite a very bitter conflict. So our second speaker today, Adem Carroll, is that person here? Yes, yes, is going to be talking about interfaith dialogue and peacemaking in both Burma and New York. And just to warn him, I will again be alerting him at the 15-minute mark. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to do a little bit of reading, but not too much, and show some slides as well. I'm with Burma Task Force, which is an advocacy group. It doesn't do a lot of peacemaking, but we're looking into moving into peacemaking, specifically in Burma. I hope that this will be transferable knowledge for Nigeria, for Israel-Palestine, for the United States, and a lot of it does deal with anti-Muslim or Islamophobic impact. My background as a Muslim American in New York City impacts how I understand and frame questions of interfaith dialogue. Is interfaith dialogue, what is its relation to peacemaking, what models are there, and so forth. Islamophobia has had an unfortunate effect on political and media discourse in post-9/11 USA. With ongoing real and perceived threats of conflict and terror, the securitization of public discourse on public policy can lead to a distorted assessment of the impact of religious ideology. But instead of one cause, Islam, many social and cultural factors converge to produce conflict between and within faith communities. Simplistic analysis regarding the role of religious teachings is counterproductive, whether concerning Islam or Buddhism or any other religion. In this short paper, I propose to begin by examining current trends in Burmese interfaith engagement, followed by a brief look at grassroots models of interfaith engagement in New York City, offered as a frame of comparison and reflection, since they both share the Islamophobic aspect. So I don't know how many of you know about the situation in Burma. There was a dictatorship, military dictatorship, for certainly over 30 years. Many of the ethnic communities were actually fighting with the central government, which changed the name officially from Burma to Myanmar. It's really the same word in the language, so I say Burma, doesn't matter. anyway, with the Burma, the Burman ethnic group is mainly in charge of the military. There are 135 ethnic groups, but some of them are quite small. And again, many of them have been in conflict with the central government because of the policies of the military. One of the most persecuted groups, and the one that until very recently has been completely nonviolent, is the Rohingya Muslim minority in Rakhine State. And so there's been oppression over many years. The 1982 citizenship laws took away their status as citizens. However, the worsening of their situation has really been incremental, with their right to travel within Burma taken away, their right to intermarry, their right to have as many children as they want without getting permission from some bureaucrat that they have to pay a bribe to, their right for education. They can't go to school anymore, their right to work. And so one by one, their rights have been taken away and they've been made stateless. And one aspect of this in recent years, and it's become allied to violence as well, attacks on their villages and neighborhoods, is the rise of a Buddhist nationalism movement called Ma Ba Tha, earlier called 969 movement. And these monks obviously are highly organized, and this does not mean that all Buddhists in Burma support this, but they have spread Islamophobia throughout the country, increasingly in targeting not only the Rohingya Muslims, but the Kaman Muslims, the other ethnic groups that have Muslims within them. So these are rallying in 2015 to pass the race and religion laws, which severely restricted and or banned intermarriage with Muslims. The Time magazine featured their one of the main leaders, Wuratu, and of course they're protesting the Time magazine. They're protesting also the Human Rights Special Rapporteur, the earlier one, but they protest all the UN groups that try to have some oversight. They also ran out Doctors Without Borders that provides humanitarian assistance, mainly medical help, to the Rohingya, who otherwise have no access to it. They're expelled from Burma for almost a year. And so now the other humanitarian agencies are afraid to criticize these policies. So mosques, I think over 300 mosques have been burned. Again, the Rohingya have been in Burma for centuries. It's a little unclear, but there are European travelers' documentations that talk about the Rohingya in the 18th century. This is all denied by this anti-Muslim movement and elements in the military. But it's and erasing their identity can be said to be a form of genocide, when you connect it to all these policies. So there are people fleeing by boat, and there's hundreds of thousands in Malaysia, 100,000 in Malaysia, 300,000 at least in Bangladesh, many in Indonesia, many in Saudi Arabia. They've flooded, and one could say they're destabilizing the region. We talk about refugees from Syria in Europe. This gets a lot less attention, and unfortunately many of these fall into the hands of traffickers, and there are mass graves, and nobody knows how many have been killed. But they're forced to work in the seafood industry. Maybe our tuna fish sandwich was prepared by slaves, essentially, in the area. So the ASEAN, the Asian countries in the region, have some mixed record. They do receive refugees, some of them, but they don't give the refugees rights. Some of them haven't signed on to refugee conventions. Some of them have not signed on to other things, or don't register them. And so in Bangladesh, a tenth of the total are registered. This means that they don't have rights to aid, and they're really an underclass. The same in Malaysia and so forth. So It's a regional problem, and again, as you know, probably Aung San Suu Kyi is a human rights icon. She was actually, her party was elected into office, and they took office this year in April, and we thought this was going to change everything. It has changed nothing. And it's because it's a power-sharing relationship. The military wrote the Constitution to ensure its control of certain key ministries, including, of course, military, but border and home affairs. And it's really controlled the government. And in the last 3 weeks, there's been an upsurge in violence in Rakhine State, and the military has been killing and raping Rohingya, unfortunately. The situation is getting much worse. Now, to move quickly into interfaith, first of all, it's very challenging. As you see, the Kachin people, another ethnic group that's been in conflict with the government, they tried to organize an interfaith group, and just this 6th October, and the military tried to block them. Amnesty International's prisoner of conscience, Hitin Linlu, was actually with the party that just got voted into office, and he had to wait until that moment before he was freed. He was arrested last year and held and had in hard labor because he criticized the extremist Buddhist movement. So much for freedom of speech. This man is still in jail, and he is with the Harmony Interfaith Youth Volunteer Group, and he was arrested. Also, essentially, the military is trying to throw its weight around and show that, you know, his work is because Kachin identity and Kachin religion, as we'll touch on, are in opposition in some ways to this Burmanization of society, of Burma, of this one ethnic group's attempt to control. That's fine, yeah. So then there is a Rakhine Commission which was just established. This is the only thing that Aung San Suu Kyi has done. It's supposed to decide the future of the Rakhine State and the Rohingya people. However, there are no Rohingya members allowed as part of this commission. The head is Kofi Annan, former Secretary General and of the United Nations, but the mandate is very limited. They are not supposed to monitor human rights, so we don't really know what to expect from that. Now, interfaith efforts include Ai Luin, who's a Muslim, who's part of Religions for Peace. He's a member of this Rakhine Commission. Thank you. And Hisin Tao. And in my paper, which is quite long, really, I do profiles of these men and also some others who are working for peace. And Hisin Tao is established a Buddhist-Muslim dialogue. He's trying to create an interfaith university over there. He has some orphanages and he has some farms. He's quite an entrepreneur. I met him here at the UN. And so he has a real presence, a spiritual presence one responds to. He's got charisma, and so we'll see what he is able to do. Another model is the Myanmar Institute of Theology, which is, as you see by this book, without Buddha I could not be Christian. There's a lot of interesting approaches. It was established by Mr. Judson, who came to Burma in 2013, and actually Burma has the third largest population of Baptists in the world. So many Kachin and Karen people are Baptists, and they have wonderful workshops, and unfortunately because of time I can't read quotes from them, but Daniel Butri has been giving regular peacemaking trainings there based on just peacemaking, but he's adapted for an interfaith model. So just peacemaking is incorporating social justice into peacemaking, and there's a lot of very creative transformational work using power, group dynamics and anger management and diversity training, all kinds of things that are actually having an impact. So the school, again, has a good, strong relationship with the Burmese, in part because during the worst time of the dictatorship, they shut down all the schools. And so the Buddhists had to also come to the theological seminary. A smaller number of Muslims came. So again, there are various religions for peace, AIDS prevention, various Christian solidarity worldwide, various groups that are doing Angelina Jolie of all people, and so this is beginning. Before I started this research for the paper, I didn't know this, and I talked to many Burmese. They didn't know this. So this is one challenge for us about scaling up our activities. It's like it's happening out there in secret in the theological seminaries. Theory might happen in the schools, but the people actually on the ground don't theorize very much. They just try to build bridges with their neighbors. So again, it's now moving into the My Friend Selfie campaign. Social media is arriving finally in Burma, and some of the young people are involved in this. And in fact, I can talk to them by Facebook and talk about what they're doing almost in real time, which is very exciting. And so here in New York, our chairman is Imam Malik Mujahid, who until this year was the head of the Parliament of World Religions, which is a revival of an older model from the 19th century. So we're at the UN, we're at various places, trying to bring up human rights and also interfaith. We kind of compartmentalize our Burma advocacy and our peace work and our interfaith work. They don't quite come together, but we have given awards to Buddhist monks in Oslo, for example, about a year ago. We're trying to build relations in this way. Islamophobia continues to rise. It's not just Donald Trump. All of us Muslims are very aware of Pamela Geller and how well-funded some of these Islamophobes are in the United States. But it's a global thing. It's in India, it's in Sri Lanka, it's in many places, including Burma. So, we know that we're dealing with something that's spread by the media, by social media. It's very irritating, and it's also people oppress, internalize oppression. So there are challenges. I work with the Flushing Interfaith Council, which it does peacemaking, but it's not a huge growing growing group. It is quite stable, though, and we are based in Flushing, which is the birthplace of religious freedom because of something called the Flushing Remonstrance in the 1600s. So it was the first document protecting Quakers and Turks and Arabs and various groups. It was a statement of religious freedom and solidarity from that time. And so we are inspired by that. We did a new version of it to respond to NYPD and other surveillance policies that are an ongoing concern in New York and in our society post 9/11. And we do various walks where we visit each other's houses of worship, and we have some shared food pantries and reading groups and various things. So again, within the Muslim community, intrafaith is a challenge, and I think this is probably true in all our communities. Maintaining, relationships within each faith community. We split over the NYPD surveillance between some people who wanted to be more friendly towards the police and careful in our relationships, and others who wanted to challenge them. And I was part of the challenging group. This guy actually is right in the middle. He wanted to put himself in the middle. Those of us challenging boycotted Mayor Bloomberg's breakfast at some point. Others attended, and he attended, but he wore the shirt, so he wanted to be the third way. But there's a lot of activity and interfaith in this building, but throughout the city, there's the UN, there's many groups. Sometimes we work together well and sometimes not. But the challenge is these three were killed, So we had 3 imams who were killed in Queens only, this summer. And so there are, Islamophobia is actually resulting in acts of violence, and many mosques have been vandalized and burned here. It doesn't compare to what's happening in Burma and perhaps elsewhere, but we are trying to work for pluralism and peace. And I think that just to sum up really quickly, there are so many factors at play. There's tribalism, globalism, capitalism, local issues. There's negotiating values. I mean, I'm because of the local New York work, I was able to get a Jewish group to organize on Burma issues. It's called JACOB, Jewish Alliance of Concern over Burma. And they've, just this past Tuesday, I was in Washington, D.C. We had a rally with the Rohingya, and I was able to get Rabbi Jack Moline from Interfaith Alliance to come and speak. So we're trying to build bridges here. It's thinking globally, but acting locally. But I think as a Muslim, I don't think that either here or in Burma, the Muslim community is as active and organized in responding, because we're under attack. And so we do need allies to speak up, but at the same time, we have a capacity and resource issue. And I think that some of it is because our leaders are in the charismatic mode and haven't strengthened institutions that much. They don't delegate so much, where we have to develop further. And I think that also, in terms of language, in places like Burma, the BBC Burma, in the Burmese language, they'll say one thing, and in the English language, they'll say another. There's a lot of this kind of two-faced thing. And here also, I think, I didn't emphasize language in this presentation, but we're trying to come up with a language of pluralism where we can, adapt teaching stories to the Muslim faith, but also curricula, also not just a lecture format, but interactive approaches. And I think Sufism and other groups like other traditions like that offer a wealth of teaching stories, but it isn't that available to the mainstream Muslim community. So I think we have a lot of interfaith work to do, and a lot of work to do as we work towards transformation and peacemaking. So thank you very much.